Welcome the Lord's chosen. Sometimes the most dangerous lie isn't the one told to your face, but the one told about you behind your back to someone who actually mattered. Let that sink in. Now here's a little known fact. Over 80% of people will believe a well-told lie if it comes from someone they trust, especially if it's about someone they don't know well yet. Let that number dance around your head while you remember this. You weren't misunderstood. You were misrepresented on purpose. And the worst part, they didn't just lie about you, they lied about you to the wrong person, someone who was either divinely assigned to elevate you, defend you, or align with you. And now, the liar's playing dead, avoiding eye contact, and suddenly acting like you don't exist. How convenient, right? But let's not lie. You've probably caught yourself wondering, why did they back off so fast? Why does their energy feel off? Why is that mutual connection suddenly watching me different? Here's the truth that will either make you laugh or flip the nearest table. They're not avoiding you because you did something wrong. They're avoiding you because their lie couldn't outlive your presence. And now, every time they see you breathing, smiling, or glowing in your lane, they're haunted by the fact that their version of you is dying, but the real you is thriving. So let's get into it, because today, we're unraveling the messy, manipulative masterpiece that happens when a chosen one gets slandered to the wrong soul. And the fallout? Oh, it's biblical. Number one, their lie was a character assassination, but the wrong soul became the witness. They didn't just casually talk about you, what they did was calculated. It was a full-on hit job, but instead of using weapons, they used words. Words twisted just enough to sound believable, but sharp enough to destroy. They weren't venting. They were crafting a story, a version of you that made them look like the innocent one, the misunderstood one, the victim. But here's where it all went wrong for them. They told that story to the wrong person. The person they chose to confide in wasn't as gullible as they thought. They expected blind loyalty, a nod of agreement, maybe even some added fuel to the fire. But instead they planted their lie in someone who had spiritual vision, someone who listens with discernment, not just ears. That person didn't take the story at face value. They started watching, observing, comparing. And slowly your actions started to speak louder than their words. You didn't even know you were being tested. You were just being yourself, calm, consistent, moving with integrity. Meanwhile, the person who heard the lie began to notice that things weren't adding up. The story they were told didn't match the energy you carried. It didn't match the peace you walked in. It didn't match your actions, your words, or the way people genuinely responded to you. And just like that, the lie started crumbling. Now the liar is staying away, not because they're ashamed, but because they're scared. They don't know what that other person really thinks anymore. They're unsure if their cover is blown. They don't know if you've had a conversation yet, and that uncertainty is eating at them. So instead of owning it or fixing it, they disappear. They retreat. They avoid you like you're the one with the problem, but the truth is your presence is proof. It's proof that they had to lie to compete. And the fact that you're still standing, still glowing, still blessed, that's the loudest contradiction to their entire performance. Number two, they were hoping to manipulate the narrative, but it backfired into revelation. They didn't lie to tell a story, they lied to control one. That's the part people miss. This wasn't some slip of the tongue or heat of the moment gossip. It was strategic. They were trying to shape how someone else saw you. They needed to get ahead of the truth because deep down they knew if the right person got to know the real you, it was game over for them. So they used what little influence they had to manipulate the narrative. Maybe they played the victim, maybe they sprinkled just enough truth to make the lie sound convincing. Whatever tactic they used, it was designed to paint you in the worst light possible, quietly, subtly, like they were just concerned. But here's where the whole thing flipped on them. It didn't land the way they expected. It didn't generate disgust or distance. It sparked curiosity. Instead of convincing the other person to stay away from you, their lie made that person pay attention, not to the drama, but to the details, to your energy, to how you carried yourself. The more they watched you, the more your truth started to shine through. And suddenly, what was meant to discredit you began to expose them. The manipulation became obvious. The fake humility started to look performative. The cracks in their story showed up, and now they're panicking. They know they've been clocked, but they can't confirm it. That's why they're staying quiet. That's why the energy shifted. They didn't just lose control of the narrative. They accidentally handed it over to someone who's capable of seeing the full picture. That's the real backfire. They lied to maintain power, but instead, the lie exposed the lengths they'd go to hold on to something that was never really theirs to begin with. And now they're avoiding you not because they've won, but because they're watching the truth unroll like film, frame by frame, and they don't know how it ends for them. Number 3, the lie created a mirror, and the person they lied to saw them, not you. When they talked about you, they weren't just lying, they were projecting. They made you sound like a problem, like someone who couldn't be trusted, someone with hidden motives, but what they were really doing was describing themselves in disguise. And the person they were talking to, they caught on faster than expected, because some people don't just listen, they read. They read between the lines. They read the tone, they read the energy. So when the liar opened their mouth to warn someone about you, they accidentally held up a mirror. And the person they were talking to didn't see you in that reflection. They saw them, their insecurities, their jealousy, their need to be seen as the good one. And suddenly the whole thing started to feel off. Because the story didn't sound like concern, it sounded like competition dressed as care. That's when everything shifted. The person they lied to didn't call it out, didn't argue, didn't cause a scene. They just started watching, quietly, closely. They began observing both of you, and the more they watched, the more the lie unraveled. Because you weren't out here messy, you weren't starting drama, you weren't even aware your name was in someone else's mouth. You were just doing what you do, living, moving, building, growing. And that quiet contrast said everything. Now the liar feels exposed, even if nothing's been said. That's why they're backing off. That's why the silence feels heavy. Because they can't control what the other person is thinking anymore. They can't undo what they revealed about themselves while trying to slander you. The more they tried to make you look bad, the more their own truth slipped through. And now every interaction is awkward, forced, full of tension. Because the mirror they held up didn't reflect you at all. It reflected everything they were hoping to hide. Number 4, they lied for control. But their target started admiring your resistance. They didn't lie because they were hurt. They lied because they wanted control. Control over how others saw you. Control over the attention you were getting. Control over the room you never even tried to dominate. You weren't the loudest, the flashiest, or the most dramatic, but what you had was a kind of inner steadiness that made people take notice. And that terrified them. So they did what cowards often do when they feel small in the presence of something real. They ran to someone influential and started planting seeds. Subtle things, phrases like, "I don't know about them," or "something just feels off." But behind those casual jabs was a deeper motive. They were trying to shrink you before anyone got close enough to witness the strength they couldn't replicate. But here's where it all broke down. The person they lied to didn't just absorb their words, they started observing you. And what they saw didn't match the warning. In fact, the more pressure you faced, the calmer you became. You didn't clap back, you didn't chase rumors, you didn't try to explain yourself to people who were never meant to understand you. You stayed rooted. That quiet grace you carried, it spoke louder than any lie ever could. And suddenly, the one who was warned started watching differently. They noticed your consistency. They noticed how you carried tension without crumbling, how you didn't need a spotlight to be powerful, and that admiration, it shifted everything. The liar could feel it. Attention was moving away from them, not toward your drama, but toward your dignity. That's when the silence started, not out of guilt, not out of a change of heart, but out of fear. Fear that their manipulation had been seen for what it really was. Jealousy wrapped in fake concern. Now they're keeping their distance, not to protect you, but to protect themselves from being fully exposed. Because once people start admiring the one they tried to destroy, the lie loses its grip, and so does the liar. Number 5, they weaponized your name, but didn't expect it to become your witness. They thought your name would do damage once it left their lips. They thought saying it with just enough venom, just enough sarcasm, just enough fake concern would ruin you before you ever had a chance to speak for yourself. They wanted your name to trigger suspicion, eye rolls, maybe even disgust. So they dropped it like poison into the ears of someone they thought they could influence, someone whose opinion held weight. But here's where it all went sideways. Your name didn't land like poison. it landed like a spark. Instead of pushing the other person away from you, it pulled them in, because something didn't sit right. The tone, the delivery, the timing, it all felt too rehearsed. So the person they lied to started doing their own silent research. They started observing not from second-hand information, but first-hand truth. And what they saw didn't match the narrative. Your actions didn't align with the warning. Your energy didn't reflect the accusation. You weren't defensive, desperate, or chaotic. You were steady, focused, and far too busy building to be bothered. That's when things started shifting. Your name, which was supposed to be a red flag, became something entirely different. It became a signal to look deeper, to question the messenger, to reconsider who was really the problem. And the more your name came up, the more the truth revealed itself, not through arguments or drama, but through your life. Now the liar's losing grip, and they know it. The name they tried to weaponize is working against them. Every time it's mentioned now, it doesn't trigger suspicion. It triggers curiosity, respect, even admiration. Because the person they tried to turn against you, they're not running from your name anymore. They're drawn to it. And that's the irony. The lie they crafted so carefully is now the very reason someone started seeing you for who you really are. Your name didn't become a warning. It became your witness. Number 6, their fear isn't about guilt. It's about your influence outlasting their lies. They're not avoiding you because they feel bad. Don't let the silence fool you. This isn't guilt, it's strategy, because deep down they know exactly what they did. They know what they said, and they know who they said it to. But guilt would mean they had the self-awareness to take accountability. This isn't that. What they're really afraid of is that everything they tried to bury is still rising, and worse, being seen. They thought their lie would be enough to cancel your presence, that if they spoke low enough, early enough, and with enough confidence, they could take you out quietly. No confrontation needed. They were banking on their influence being louder than your character. But your life kept speaking. Your work kept unfolding. Your energy kept showing up in rooms where your name had already been dragged. And instead of fading, you started glowing. That's what rattles them, not the lie itself, but the fact that the lie didn't work. You're still here, you're still relevant. You're still being respected. In some cases, you're even being sought out by the very people they tried to turn against you. That's not something they planned for. They didn't expect your consistency to outlive their drama. They didn't expect your fruit to outshine their fiction. And now, they're the ones shrinking in spaces where they once felt bold. Their silence isn't remorse, it's panic. Because your influence is becoming undeniable, and that's what really scares them. You weren't supposed to recover. You weren't supposed to grow. You weren't supposed to be in the same circles, having the same impact, getting the same recognition, but you are. And now every step you take forward is a reminder that their smear campaign failed. They tried to remove you, but instead they just gave you a stage. Number 7, they lied to the wrong person, a destiny connector, not a follower. They weren't careful with their words because they thought they were speaking to just another follower. Someone they could easily manipulate, someone who would echo their bitterness without question. But they miscalculated badly. The person they chose to poison with lies wasn't just a passive listener. They were a destiny connector. Someone with real spiritual authority, someone whose discernment is sharp and whose presence holds weight in the unseen and the seen. They thought they were gossiping. What they were actually doing was interfering with divine alignment, and that never ends well. This wasn't some random misunderstanding. This was sabotage, and it was aimed at stopping something bigger than just a friendship or a connection. The liar tried to block a kingdom-level partnership, a divine collaboration, or a spiritual assignment because they could feel how important you were. They didn't have the language for it, but they could sense your potential. And rather than deal with their own insecurity, they tried to preempt your influence by feeding someone important a distorted version of you. But here's the twist. The person they lied to isn't easily swayed. They're used to snakes in smiling faces. They've been entrusted with too much to fall for smooth words and subtle shade. So instead of jumping to conclusions, they paused. They listened, but they didn't absorb. And now they're watching, with spiritual eyes wide open. They're observing you with fresh interest. Every move you make, every word you speak, is now under divine scrutiny. Not because you're being judged, but because something feels off. Not about you, but about the one who brought your name up in the first place. What was meant to destroy your credibility is now making that person look questionable. The energy is off, the timing is suspicious, the motive is leaking, and now the tables are turning. Because that lie didn't just fall flat, it revealed something. And the destiny connector is no longer looking at you through someone else's words, they're looking at them through your actions. And that shift, it changes everything. Number 8, they lied because they knew the truth would make you irresistible. They didn't lie out of confusion, they lied out of calculation. They knew exactly what they were doing. They saw the way your presence shifted rooms, the way your authenticity couldn't be ignored. You didn't try to compete, but somehow you still outshined. That quiet confidence you carry, it's disruptive to people who rely on performance to get noticed. And the worst part for them, it wasn't just that you were powerful, it was that you were undeniably magnetic. They could feel it. That person they lied to was already drawn to you. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was admiration, maybe it was something deeper, spiritual even, an alignment forming. And the liar saw it happening before you even had a clue. They saw your name floating into conversations, your energy being felt before you physically arrived. And they panicked. Not because you'd done anything wrong, but because if the truth got through, you would have been chosen. And they knew it. So they did what insecure people always do when they sensed someone else's light might outshine their own. They tried to dim it before it had a chance to shine fully. They crafted a story, added just enough exaggeration to make it believable, and delivered it like they were protecting the other person from some hidden danger. But it wasn't protection, it was prevention, from connection, from alignment, from truth. They knew that once the real you was seen, there would be no unseeing it. You would have been embraced, elevated, valued, and that's what they couldn't allow. So they moved first, not out of wisdom, but out of desperation, because your truth was too clean, too consistent, too compelling. Left unchecked, it would have made you irresistible. Now the tension you feel isn't guilt. It's the residue of someone trying to block a divine appointment with a human opinion. But the real twist, that lie didn't erase your light. It just delayed its revelation. And once the truth reaches the person it was meant for, there's no stopping what's next. Number 9, they created distance because they can't risk accountability. They didn't disappear to protect their peace. They vanished to protect their lie. The truth is they're not at peace at all. They're anxious, on edge, watching from a distance and hoping the pieces never connect. They created space between you and them because they know one simple conversation could end everything they've worked so hard to fabricate. It's not that they're done with you, it's that they're terrified you're about to start seeing clearly. They ghosted you not because they've healed, but because your presence is a liability. Being near you increases the risk that you might talk, risk that the person they lied to might actually ask you questions, risk that the fake version of the story they told starts unraveling in real time. So they cut off access, blocked, muted, disappeared, whatever they had to do to keep the story from falling apart. But they're not in control anymore, and that's what's driving their silence. Because now they're not sure what you know. They're not sure if that person they lied to is still on their side. They don't know if you've been watching things click into place, so they keep their distance, not as a sign of maturity, but as a shield. Because proximity would require honesty. It would demand accountability. And they can't afford that. They've built too much on this false version of you, the sympathy, the alliances, the access. It's all resting on a lie. And the closer you get to the people they manipulated, the more fragile their foundation becomes. One honest conversation is all it would take for everything to collapse. You're not confused. You were never the issue. They are. They're the ones stuck living in fear of the truth you carry, and now every step you take toward clarity puts pressure on the cracks they tried to hide. That's why they're gone. Not because you're wrong, but because they are. Number 10, you became the proof of their manipulation simply by existing. You didn't have to call them out. You didn't need to post cryptic quotes or clear your name in some dramatic scene. You just kept being real, kept showing up in your full truth, and that alone became the most uncomfortable mirror they've ever faced. You didn't need to fight for credibility. Your consistency is your credibility. Your existence, unbothered and undistorted, became the very thing that made their manipulation obvious. Because if everything they said about you were true, you should have crumbled by now. You should be bitter, chaotic, or hiding. But instead, you're steady. You're aligned. You're glowing in places they said you'd never reach. And every success, every quiet moment of peace, every time your name comes up in a positive light, it undoes the script they wrote. You became the proof. Not because you tried to be, but because the truth has a frequency. It doesn't have to shout, it just resonates. And yours is ringing louder than ever. The lie they told doesn't match the life you're living. And the people paying attention, they can feel the disconnect. They may not say it out loud, but they're watching. The energy isn't adding up. The smear campaign is starting to look like projection. The silence is starting to look like fear. And you're starting to look like evidence. They thought lying would bury you, but all it did was expose them. Because now, the contrast between their words and your walk is undeniable. They wanted to control how people viewed you, but all they've done is shine a brighter light on their own insecurity. They had to twist the truth because the real version of you would have dismantled their entire image. So no, you don't need to say anything. Just keep living, keep building, keep being. Every time they hear your name now, it reminds them of the one thing they can't silence or spin. You're still standing. And that was never supposed to happen. Number 11, their lie wasn't just about you. It was a last-ditch effort to preserve a false identity. They didn't lie just to take you down. They lied because you exposed something in them they couldn't afford to face. Your presence didn't just challenge their narrative about you. It shook the false identity they'd carefully constructed for themselves. They weren't just trying to turn someone against you. They were trying to protect a version of themselves that only works if you're the problem. You didn't even know you were a threat. Yet somehow your confidence, your clarity, your authenticity made them feel like they were standing in front of a mirror they didn't ask for. They had worked so hard to be seen a certain way, maybe as the victim, maybe as the wise one, maybe as the misunderstood, selfless friend. But whatever mask they wore, it only stayed intact if people didn't look too closely. And then you came along, someone they couldn't control, someone who didn't need to perform to be accepted. And that terrified them, so they panicked. They knew the person they lied to respected you, or would have if they'd gotten the chance, and they couldn't risk that. So they acted fast. They made you the unstable one, the selfish one, the unsafe one. Not because it was true, but because your truth, your realness, your light, your unapologetic wholeness was a direct threat to the illusion they were selling. But lies are temporary. Energy is not. And now the truth is starting to breathe. Not because you forced it, but because it can't stay buried. The person they manipulated is starting to see the cracks. Not in you, but in them. The inconsistencies, the energy that doesn't match the story, the desperation hidden behind all the concern. And suddenly it's not your reputation on trial anymore, it's theirs. They lied to preserve their mask. But the longer you stand firm in who you are, the more that mask starts slipping. And when it falls, it won't be your truth that crumbles. It'll be the false image they built on your back. Number 12, they're avoiding you because you're the one person who could expose the pattern. They're not avoiding you out of coincidence or convenience. They're avoiding you like their survival depends on it, because in some ways it does. You're not just another name on the list. You're the one who could unravel everything. You've seen enough, discerned enough, and grown enough to trace the pattern they've been trying to keep hidden for years. This isn't their first lie, their first smear campaign, or their first character assassination. You're just the first one who can see the thread, and that makes you dangerous. They know you carry more than receipts, you carry insight. You've been paying attention not just to what they said, but how they move, who they target, when they shift. The sudden closeness, the convenient fallout, the quiet whispers they frame as concern. You've clocked it all. And while others were too wounded, too confused, or too naive to recognize the cycle, you caught it. You didn't just experience their tactics, you decoded them. And that makes you a threat not to their peace, but to their illusion. Because here's the truth they can't outrun. You have the anointing and the awareness. You don't just survive attacks. You see the architecture of them, and you don't need to yell to be heard. Your discernment speaks. That's why they treat you like a threat, even in silence. Because you're the one person who could gather the people they've hurt, connect the dots, and call out the spirit behind their manipulation without ever raising your voice. They fear exposure, not because of what you might say, but because of who might believe you. You've got weight now, spiritual credibility, a presence that makes lies uncomfortable and patterns obvious, and they can't afford that. So they keep their distance, not out of healing, but out of self-preservation. Because if you ever decide to speak, if you ever choose to illuminate what you know, it won't just be one lie falling apart, it'll be their entire cycle, dragged into the light they hoped you'd never survive long enough to carry. They thought they were being smart, crafting a narrative that would cut you off before you could build anything. The goal wasn't just to smear your name, it was to isolate you, to make sure you wouldn't have the social support, the spiritual covering, or the relational trust to rise, because in their mind, if they could get ahead of your truth, they could control the room you hadn't even entered yet. They weren't trying to hurt you randomly, they were trying to rob you of your connections, your credibility, and ultimately, your calling. But the plan backfired. Because while they were busy building alliances on broken information, you were busy building yourself. They used gossip, you used growth, they relied on being liked, you relied on being rooted. And what they didn't count on was that lies expire. Truth doesn't always move fast, but it doesn't die. And now, the story they told is starting to smell. People are sensing the off energy. They're asking quiet questions. And worst of all, for them, you're still here. Present, centered, flourishing in ways they swore you never would. Number 13, they lied to isolate you, but ended up isolating themselves. The isolation tactic didn't just fail, it reversed. They're the ones shrinking now. The same spaces they tried to dominate feel tense when they enter. The same people they tried to sway are starting to pull back. Not because you said anything, but because their lie is aging like spoiled milk, and your silence is starting to make sense. They didn't just fail to isolate you, they isolated themselves. Because lies attract fast, but they don't last. And once people start seeing you for themselves, your consistency, your clarity, your peace, they realize the version they were sold doesn't match the reality in front of them. And the one who crafted the false story, suddenly they're the one who seems out of place, overly defensive, strangely distant, quiet in all the wrong moments. They thought they were writing your exit, but all they did was fast forward their own, because truth doesn't need to rush, it just needs time. They walk the other way, not because you're intimidating, but because you're undeniable. You're the proof they never wanted to exist. You weren't supposed to still be here. You weren't supposed to thrive after what they did. They thought the smear campaign would stick, that their twisted version of the story would spread fast enough to choke out your voice, but it didn't. And now every breath you take, every step forward, every room you enter with grace and authority is a reminder of one thing they can't stomach. They lost. They threw everything at you, words sharpened into weapons, whispers masked as concern, relationships designed to collapse under pressure. And for a while, it looked like it worked. You were isolated, questioned, maybe even doubted yourself. But what they didn't realize was that your name wasn't just held by people, it was held by God. And when heaven calls you, no amount of slander can unchoose you. They didn't just lie to others about you. They tried to lie to themselves, telling themselves that what they did was justified, that you deserved it, that your downfall would prove their worth. But now they can't even face you, because seeing you still walking in power means they were never in control to begin with. What haunts them isn't just your resilience, it's the lightness in your stride, the peace that couldn't possibly come from someone who was what they said you were. Your survival makes their narrative fall apart. Your fruit exposes their fraud, and so they avoid you, not because they're over it, but because they can't bear to see the evidence of their failure. They tried to silence what heaven had endorsed. They tried to erase what was written in divine ink, but you're still here, louder without speaking, bigger without bragging. Because when God calls you, no lie, no smear, no betrayal can cancel what's already been sealed. You're not just alive, you're anointed proof that they never had the final say, and they know it. Number 14, they avoid you because you're the living reminder that they couldn't kill what God called. They can't look you in the eye, not because you did anything wrong, but because you're still here. You're not supposed to be. According to their plan, you should have been buried by now, emotionally, spiritually, socially. They thought their smear campaign would finish you. They threw everything they had, false stories, whispered warnings, calculated distance. But even after all that, you didn't break, you didn't fold, you didn't fade, and that's the problem. You're the proof that their power was never real. You're the living, breathing contradiction to every lie they told. You were supposed to collapse under the pressure, disappear in the shadows, lose your voice in the noise of their false narratives. But instead you evolved. You got quieter, but not weaker. You got stiller, but more potent. You didn't defend yourself in chaos because you knew heaven was defending you in silence. They avoid you now because your presence convicts them, not out of guilt, but because every time they see you, they're reminded that they failed. You didn't just survive their betrayal, you thrived beyond it. You're walking in grace they don't understand. You're carrying peace that makes no sense based on what you've been through. And that's unsettling for people who believed they had the final word over your life, but they didn't. They never had the authority to cancel what God called. They never had the reach to undo what was already written in divine ink. You were chosen before they ever spoke your name. And now your very existence drags their lie into the light. You don't have to say a word. Your presence is enough. Your peace is loud. Your fruit is undeniable. And your survival, that's the sermon they can't unhear. So let them avoid you. Let them tremble in the face of what they tried to destroy. You are the reminder that what's divinely protected can never be buried by human sabotage. They couldn't kill it because they never called it. Let them stay silent. Let them avoid you. Let them fumble through the weight of their own web of lies, because the truth is they didn't just lie about you. They revealed everything about themselves. They tried to erase you from rooms you were destined to walk in. They thought slander would be a shortcut to status. But what they forgot is that no lie, no matter how eloquently told, can outlive a life rooted in truth. You didn't fight back with venom. You didn't launch a counterattack. You simply kept living, kept glowing, kept building, and that's what's burning them now. They're not haunted by your retaliation. They're haunted by your resilience. You were the one variable they couldn't control. You were the one voice they couldn't drown. And now, the narrative they crafted is collapsing under the weight of your reality. Every lie they told planted a seed of suspicion in them, not you. Because the people they tried to turn against you are starting to see the cracks. They're watching your name rise, your influence stretch, your peace deepen. And slowly, the mask is slipping on the one who swore they were the victim. Because the truth, it has a pulse. And now it's thundering in every room they hoped you'd never enter again. You never had to defend yourself. Your life did it for you. And the same story they used to slander you, it's now being rewritten into a testimony. So don't worry about who distanced themselves. Don't chase clarity from those who benefited from confusion. Let the silence speak for them. Let the fruit speak for you. And keep walking like the chosen one you are. Not because you're trying to prove a point, but because your very existence is the point. You weren't just lied about, you were revealed. And now nothing can stop the light they tried to bury. You are the proof. You are the prophecy. You are still becoming the version of you they swore could never exist. And that is why they stay away. If this message resonated with you and you're ready to step into your truth and power, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a word that strengthens your journey. If you found value here, please like the video. It helps more people find this message who need it just as much as you do. Drop a comment below and share your story or thoughts. Your voice matters, and your experience could be the breakthrough someone else needs to hear. And don't forget to share this with anyone who's been misunderstood, underestimated, or mislabeled, because together we rise above the lies and walk boldly into our destiny. Your support keeps this community alive and thriving, so thank you for being part of this movement.